And welcome back into another edition of Dolan's Dugout with your host, Steve Dolan. I'm Ramon Scott. Steve, a lot's happened in the world since we got together last week, but we're looking forward. We're looking ahead, and sports are back on the way. I mean, we see movement in all the major sports, most of them anyway. Kind
Yeah.
of scared what's happening to our national pastime, and maybe you can get us caught up on where exactly we stand, because I know you've been following Major League Baseball's return the most, but I could talk about some other sports, and we can kind of look forward to CIF and prep sports. There's been some more news this week about schools and their eventual reopening as we get ready. I mean, I know it's only, Steve, I know it's only June 10th, but hey, the kids just graduated. Congratulations to all the grads, especially here in the East County. We're so proud of the class of 2020, a class which will, go down in history as one of the most important and significant classes of our time.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this will absolutely be a unique class, Ramon. I mean, I remember, of course, the class of 2000 was unique because it was, a new millennium. But this one is really going to be different. I mean, again, having the drive-throughs and all, so to speak, with the graduations and all. It's funny because being a sports show, I know I saw it on a local CBS last night. I saw in the Texas Rangers new stadium where a guy from Burleson High School, which is, I believe, between Fort Worth and Arlington there in the Dallas area, kid hit the first home run in the new Rangers stadium, so to speak, because he was running around the bases, circling his arms like he hit a home run. So they were basically saying on the news, first home run in the new Rangers stadium, just hoping there is baseball. A couple of sports, as you know, golf's coming up this weekend without fans. NASCAR's going to have some fans next month in Florida. It'll be interesting to see how that goes. But, of course, you mentioned baseball. Basically, where we're at right now, the owners, of course, have proposed a 76-game season, but not with a complete prorated salaries. The players say 89 games with prorated. Halfway between that, I still every number that comes out a week ago was 114 and 50. Now it's 89 and 76. The halfway number always seems to be 82. So maybe there will be an 82-game season, but I'm not so sure. More so from the owner's standpoint, because if they really are losing $640,000 a game, the more they play, the more they lose. So we'll see where that goes. That's going to be very interesting. Ramon, they need to get going soon, because the thing about baseball, I think the earliest they could start now would be about July 10th. And they got to realize if they're messing this up, because if they could have come to an agreement by today, by June 10th, and played July 1st, they would have had all of July to themselves, because no NBA, no NHL, and of course the NFL hasn't started either. So it's disappointing. What do you think?
Yeah, well, we know that, NBA has set forth their plans to head down to Florida and conduct a season. The NHL has a staged plan. They've now entered stage 2 for their return, and that's where players can go into the designated facilities and begin limited workouts with reduced players. It is kind of funny. I work in the casino business, Steve, and when I go into work every day, there's hundreds of people all together, so to speak, and yet we can't let more than 6 hockey players onto the ice at one time, or things like that. So, and I know that every region of the country has different parameters and different circumstances due to the pandemic, where maybe it's a little bit less confidence moving forward in some cities than others. I mean, like we've talked about, we're pretty lucky here in San Diego, despite our recent spikes, especially in the South Bay and South San Diego. But our healthcare facilities here are doing such a tremendous job. But really disappointed, and I think everyone is, as far as the plan, the track of action for Major League Baseball, because everyone's kind of making fun of them as far as the public's concerned, because they haven't been able to get it together. They've had time, right? All they have is time. And the Players Association and the owners can't seem to get it together. And that's what we need. I mean, look at some of these events that have appeared on TV so far. They've been very popular, especially the UFC events. They're very pleased with their results. And they openly talk about their success rate of getting everybody together, and no one being sick. They've had one incident, but NASCAR ratings, great job by them having their races so far. And I've been watching that baseball in the middle of the night, and over in Taiwan, they're allowing fans in the stands now. And so more great news there. And just moving forward, there's been some news now about schools moving forward, putting on a plan to get back to school. Everything's still tentative because we don't know if there'll be spikes or things like that. But a lot of naivete by the public in general. But if you look at it, it looks like the hospital system, the healthcare system has done a tremendous job. And I believe that's why you're seeing guidance in communities as far as loosening restrictions. It's not just some, we know it's been a tumultuous couple of weeks socially in this country, but that's not why we're opening up. We're opening up because the confidence level of medical experts to basically do an experiment. Let's go out there. Let's start to get back to work a little bit where we can, and go to social functions where we can, where it's safe, and see what the results are, because we have to move forward with our lives, and hopefully not going to lose many more lives in the months to come.
Yeah, and Ramon, because that's the main thing, is over 100,000 people have died. It's not a hoax. I mean, as you know, I have a spouse who works in healthcare, and believe me, I mean, anybody who thinks it's a hoax, I would invite them to go work at a hospital. Maybe they won't allow you in the operating room, but they certainly could use janitors, and see what goes on each day before you make a judgment on that. But I want to go back to sports too. It's interesting. We talk about baseball, football, basketball, hockey, a couple of sports that have also started up. One of them is bull riding, the PBR, professional bull riders. They've been going with no fans. They've been going for a while, and it's been working. Another one, and this is something, of course, our good friend Adam Paul from EC Preps, who's at his normal job today. Adam and I are both pro wrestling fans, and that's been going on for quite a while. That never stopped. What I find amazing, though, Ramon, and for anybody who wants to watch tonight at 8 o'clock on TNT, there's a group called AEW, which is All Elite Wrestling. They've done it right, because what they do, they have a few wrestlers around ringside while the matches are going, yelling and screaming, so it sounds like there's background noise. And the WWE, the bigger wrestling thing, has followed that. But if and when, like, baseball comes back especially, there's going to need to be background noise, because as I see with the wrestling shows, even, and I know it's staged now, but it's not staged when they fall and really get hurt. But what the thing about the background noise, the WWE for a while, no background noise, all you were hearing was when people hit each other, terrible. But just even have a few people at ringside screaming made it an atmosphere. And I think maybe at a baseball game, if they play, maybe you do it virtually, where, remember the NFL draft, how they have people like, okay, next the Indianapolis Colts pick, and they'd have people in Indianapolis yelling and screaming virtually. Maybe do that at whoever the home team is in baseball. The San Diego Padres, 50 fans at home yelling and screaming, just to have some atmosphere. But of course, before we have that atmosphere, we have to have an agreement between the owners and the players. And it's sad, because, as you know, you've got millionaire players, billionaire owners can't figure it out. And so many of us are thousandaires, hundredaires, or under 100aires, with no money nowadays that are out of work. So these guys got to figure it out. They got to realize there is a pandemic, and nobody gives a hoot about their issues and all that. I think it was great when Bob Wischusen, who's with ESPN, one of their top announcers, especially on college football, college basketball. He also does the New York Jets. As you might see, he put out on Twitter with them last week, just figure it out. Again, you've got millions and billions, and there's people out in society who are, looking for their next meal. Get it settled.
Yeah. And, you could just paint a broad brush and say, well, they'll get it done. But right now, there's no guarantee as far as Major League Baseball is concerned. I mean, that window is closing, so to speak. I mean, they kind of, haven't set a deadline or anything like that, but, you just talked about it. That window's closing, and while the other sports can continue to move in, even if it goes late into the year, those sports are played indoors, and we know Major League Baseball, they don't want to get too far into November with their situation. Now, granted, they might have contingency that's going to allow for those big games, maybe to play in neutral site cities or dome stadiums, and I don't really have a problem with that. But we just want to see it get done, and maybe the pressure of those other major sports getting back underway, especially the team sports, if they get to a situation where they start to have some scrimmages or maybe a practice game or 2 or 3 is going to maybe start to put some pressure on baseball. But right now it just seems like they're dumbfounded and don't have an answer. A lot of finger pointing and things like that. And we want our boy Tony Clark to, pull through here and show that leadership. Very, very powerful man in the baseball union, and it doesn't necessarily come down to the players, not coming to terms, because obviously the owners are the ones with the strings, the purse strings, if you will. But I guess they're just waiting for some type of, relinquishment of the players as far as their demands are concerned. And those demands are going to change the smaller the schedule gets. But man, it's just been, for me, I've been able to put my head down and get back to work because there's no sports to watch. I mean, that's how I like to, fulfill my idle time, watching games. I guess I have been doing it, watching those games from Korea and Taiwan in the middle of the night. Talk about the fans. It's kind of exciting, when I watch those games, baseball games from Taiwan, that they actually have fans in the stands. And it's kind of a surreal moment when someone hits a home run and runs around the bases and they show the fans in the stands cheering. It's a bit emotional to an extent. I mean, you're not, crying of joy, but you're like, wow, that is amazing. Look at those fans in the stands applauding. It's a big deal.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we need the fans to come back at some point. It's going to be interesting, too, Ramon, when the fans do come back. I think they're going to see a lot of different things. Like before the show, you and I were talking about, like this morning, for instance, I went to Albertsons up here in Alpine, and they've got it right. Every aisle is one way. So you and I will not ever crash into each other on the same aisle because it's a one-way aisle. And it's probably going to have to be that way, at least when it starts and sports comes back. For instance, like let's say at Petco Park, maybe if you have a few thousand fans, you'd either have to come in from left field or right field, and you'd intersect at home plate, and that's as far as you could go because you need to be going in one direction. You can't have all the, you're going from left to right and I'm going from right to left. That you can't do that right now. So it's going to be a lot different. I mean, even for us, as you know, I work with Fox Sports San Diego as the statistician. I haven't really heard anything official, but I know it's going to be a lot different for us. One thing that's going to have to happen, a lot of people who work at the ballpark now are going to have to work remotely, meaning instead of being at the ballpark, maybe being in the studio. And one thing that's going to be really interesting if and when Major League Baseball comes back is the road games are going to be done remotely, because just so people know, like for instance with the Padres, Don Orsillo and Mark Grant of Fox Sports San Diego, and let's say with 97.3 The Fan, Ted Leitner, Jesse Agler, when they're traveling the Padres, they travel with the team and they won't be able to do that now. So basically what they're talking about is the announcers will be watching a game on a monitor in a studio, calling the game there, calling it remotely. If the Padres are, let's say, in Arlington, Texas, playing the Rangers, the announcers won't be there. Now, would they go up to LA because it's close and they wouldn't be associated players? I don't know. I mean, some other things just for people to know too, and you and I have both been reporters where we've gone in locker rooms or talked to athletes after the game. What they're going to do now is it's going to be remotely. So basically after the game, it'd be, instead of having, going to the locker room, it'll be a Zoom press conference, which brings up the question. For instance, I heard Evan Grant of the Dallas Morning News, who travels with the Rangers. Do you even need to go on the road if you're not going to have access, face-to-face access with players? And we understand why you won't, but why would you need to be traveling on the road, spending a bunch of money, if all you're going to be able to do is, talk to the players remotely anyway? There's a lot of little things like that don't matter as far as, whether it gets settled. But when it does happen, I mean, the newspapers, the TV networks, the radio networks, the people that cover the teams, there's a lot of things for them to figure out too. It's not going to be the same old thing on two, so to speak.
Yeah, I'll be real interested in beat writer style coverage because, you're not only going to cover the games and who won and who lost and who's playing well and who's not, but the health aspects how everyone feels confidently, in those facilities. We're not seeing, like I said, any real instances of the sports that are being conducted right now affected by, the pandemic too much. And that's reflective of society. I mean, look, you might feel as a person, I'm not talking about you specifically, I'm talking about our viewers or anybody in general, that you might not be personally affected by COVID-19. You might not know anybody, but there is a small percentage of people that are being affected, and even smaller percentage of people that do pass away. And that's what this pandemic is really all about. I mean, it's touching hundreds of thousands of lives, but there are millions and millions and millions and billions of people in the world. So, you're just trying to protect those. We've talked about it, week after week when we've gotten into pandemic coverage, and I'm sorry I'm dragging on a little bit about it, but we're just trying to protect those that are most vulnerable. If you look at the statistics, for example, on the UT website of those people that we've lost, they kind of follow a similar demographic. I mean, you're talking about mostly, on average, people that are, in their late 70s, 80s, even 90 years old with those underlying health conditions. So those are the people that we have to protect. People that are around those people have to be more cautious than those that are not. And that's just something that someone has to make a choice in their life. I mean, do I see older people on a daily basis? If not, maybe I can commingle in society more. So that's just the way it is. But Steve, I talked earlier about the class of 2020 and how special that class is. And I just wanted to mention, when you drive around and see those, that was great. I've watched, at least on Facebook, several of the schools sent out packages of highlights and videos, and while I couldn't watch them all, I certainly tried to watch everyone for a couple of minutes, even if I didn't know the students. Just watch their names across the screen or being congratulated. And when you drive by the houses that have those signs in the yard, you don't know what that boy or girl looks like, but I certainly thought about that family and how that student was probably sheltered in their house for the last month or two doing their virtual courses. But seeing that sign made me feel like, hey, I thought about them, and that's what the sign was for, to make people think about these graduates. But I think one good thing that's come out of this whole thing for schools is I think we've found new ways to celebrate graduates. I think that moving forward, you will see more celebrations of grads that are conducted even when we get back to full stadium graduations. I think you may see things like automobile parades, signs in front yards, and things like, and painted cars to celebrate the grads. Those have kind of been going on. Painted cars, that's kind of been going on for years and years. But I just think that moving forward, we may see more celebrations like that and more virtual celebrations, because we're all becoming so in tune to how to do things virtually. So I think there's some good that has come out of this situation. So I can't wait for football season, though, man. High school football season. I mean, that's, to me, look, we're struggling with these things with baseball, basketball, and hockey at a professional level. But if we just continue to grind and mind our health P's and Q's all the way until August and kids return to school, and I think that's the big sign, the big key. If we could have those football games by September, I think that's going to be the most positive sign for late 2020 season and 2021 moving forward. I mean, that's really what I want to see.
Yeah, and I'm with you, Ramon. I want to go back a couple things that you talked about. It is ironic how, with the way things are done now, for instance, like during the NFL draft this year, remember how they showed personalities? They even showed Bill Belichick's dog. Who would have thought that the maybe most despised coach in the NFL actually has a dog, and they showed all people with their kids and stuff like that. So you saw personality, and it's funny because you mentioned the class of 2020. Literally, when I drive by next door, my next door neighbor, who I've known since she was 1 year old, when we moved in here 20 years ago, big sign, class of 2020. She just graduated from UCSD. So, I mean, you see things like that, and it's just amazing what's going on. I mean, people are doing things differently now and stuff that can carry over. It's funny because, for instance, you talk about what's going on now with football. Hopefully there will be football in the fall. Because one thing about football, it's, that's the program that carries all other sports programs. I'm hoping our good friend Adam Paul, as you know, from EC Preps, who's working in his regular job right now, one thing that he's told me a couple times, and he, as you know, he's very tight end, he said it's up to each district whether you play. So, for instance, our district could say yes or no. South Bay could say yes or no. I'm just hoping that the superintendent, Tim Glover, as our superintendent, I think it comes down to him, and obviously Brian Wilbur, who's up there in the sports, who's been in the district for a long time. Hopefully they can figure it out to where first of all and most of all, that it's safe, but that we can play these sports in the fall. I mean, I know, like, for instance, with 97.3 The Fan, as you know, I do statistics for them on Friday nights. Certainly there's a schedule out there. Certainly, week one, you've got, hopefully, if there is a season, you've got Torrey Pines playing Cathedral. Week two, you got Helix playing Oceanside. So there's some great rivalries out there. Week four, Helix Cathedral. Hopefully we get to that point. As you know, it's only June 10th. But as you know, by the end of July, teams will be practicing. And even by mid-July, you're going to be in weight training and all. So time's near, Ramon. As you know, we got maybe 35 days to where these decisions have to be made. One other thing, and you mentioned earlier, too, about what's going on this week, because, as you know, all the CIF commissioners met yesterday, today, and tomorrow, Tuesday through Thursday this week, kind of to figure it out. Don't know what you've heard so far. I haven't heard a whole lot, but let's just hope they get it figured out.
Yeah, one piece of news that did come out, there was some guidance, maybe not, it's not for certain at all, and maybe it was even for some statewide sections that basketball season could be pushed forward into the spring. I don't like that. I mean, I want to keep this schedule as similar to previous years as possible. I'm not sure why that was even discussed like it is, except for the fact that maybe if the football season gets pushed back a little bit. But, these 2 months have gone as, I don't know, some people are like, well, boy, this has really been 2 months of quarantine. It's been taken forever. But to an extent, it's been gone by very quickly. And we don't know where we're going to be even, when we get to August. I mean, we could have tremendous amounts of health department guidance, CDC guidance that has opened things up completely. And while people still may, become ill, and we can handle the caseload, if you will, if we get to a point where it's kind of status quo, or I should say business as usual moving forward, we might actually we might be back to normal, even though it'll never be normal.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, then maybe those maybe the schools, maybe the sections individually, like you said. I mean, yeah, I have seen what you've seen as far as them passing it along, saying, hey, every district for themselves. And it kind of makes sense. I mean, this is kind of, as even though it's a global problem, it's a regional situation. It's very regional because you know the numbers, where, more communities, more big cities have had bigger problems than some other areas.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting too, Ramon. I mean, obviously we're talking about high school football, and we hope that we'll have it out here in the Grossmont district, again, as long as it's safe. Look at college football. I mean, I think there's going to be some rogue conferences, so to speak, because, as you know, in California, we're not opening up as fast as other places for good reason. But the Southeastern Conference, the SEC, which is the dominant one in football, they're not going to say, oh, we're not playing because they can't play in California. It's going to be interesting because even when you get personal with us, like, as you know, the CSU system, California State University system, primarily is going to be online, although, like, if you have a lab or a nursing lab, something like that, you will be on campus, like at a place like San Diego State, because we have, of the schools in the Mountain West, 3 of them are in California. Of course, San Diego State, Fresno State, San Jose State. Would the Mountain West play without those schools, or those schools having to play fewer games, or they couldn't play home games? We don't know. But then again, if you're a school like Wyoming especially, or a Utah State or a Boise State in Idaho, they're further along as far as opening up. So it's going to be interesting too, because again, there's going to be a lot of acrimony possibly, because again, if you and I are in the same conference and I'm up in Wyoming and I'm playing and you're in San Diego State and you either A, can't play, or B, you have to play all road games because you can't play at home, it will be interesting to see what happens. And again, it's funny because like you said, this has gone by quickly. A couple, 3 months ago when we talked about this stuff, it's like, oh, well, it's out there in the future. But like the old saying, the future is now.
Yeah, and what do you think, Steve? What is the current situation as far as San Diego? I mean, we know that they kind of want to move forward at least with, virtual class, and the athletics department aren't we kind of sitting at a point where they're said, well, you know what, maybe no athletics, and then they said, well, you know what, we can still do athletics with virtual classrooms going on.
That's what they're saying, is because there are virtual classrooms, there are, quote, students on campus. Right now, the plan at San Diego State is second semester starts July 7th. So I believe football is going to be able to come back first, but all the fall sports will be able to come back. So it'll be interesting to see how that goes, because as you know, more and more is opening up in California. I mean, I hate to, it's not a nice joke at all, but like San Diego State, legitimately outside the Sky Show, which I'm sure they probably will not have this year, probably legitimate crowds 15 to 20,000. So you could do social distancing in that stadium of 70,000, even if all the Aztec fans who've been showing up do show up. But again, there's going to have to be all the for lack of better words, bells and whistles that go with it, the social distancing. I mean, you and I can't be standing in line for a hot dog. They'll have to bring it to our seats, stuff like that. But again, it's interesting because you don't know, and even the networks don't know. I mean, for instance, with Fox Sports San Diego, we just got our latest email yesterday that said you were released from all of your Major League Baseball games that you had planned through June 30th. Well, we know that they're not going to come back before at least July 1st. But with the colleges, don't know. I mean, they're hoping for the best. And, Ramon, it's funny because talking about the colleges, I want to go back to the high schools for a minute. Let's say they pushed high school football from the fall to the winter. Well, the issue you get, as you know, you went to Helix, and what's been one of the things at Helix year after year after year? You guys have great football teams. You play a month into the postseason while a lot of schools are done. So what happens with John Singer's basketball team so often at Helix? They get off to slow starts. Why? Because some of their basketball players are football players. And if football were moved into the winter with basketball, you couldn't play both. It'd be an either or, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that because, as we've been going along, excuse me, brother, going along in the pandemic, I'm not much of a Netflix type of person. I love sports, so I look for sports things to watch. And, we kind of look to pass the time. Even me, I've been working very hard, working 60 hours a week. I'll tell you about that in a minute. I think it's kind of interesting. I'll give you my personal perspective on work and the pandemic. But so I'm looking for something to watch and coming across YouTube. Get this, Steve. Never even saw this video before, and I'm amazed because I think I've seen it all. Scrolling through YouTube, or someone shared it, I think, on one of the high school basketball forums. It's on YouTube. Everyone wants to check this out. It's a video of the 1985 championship basketball game between Helix and Morse at San Diego Sports Arena, and it's the video of the game. And in the pregame show, they talked. Helix was coming into that game against Morse with one loss. They were going up against Lawrence West. Remember the great player?
Morse,
and they had a great team under Coach Davis that year. Helix came in with one loss, and they interviewed Coach Singer before the game. They had him on the side, and the videos that kind of it's right out of the 80s. I mean, it's been converted to, so it's not the best video, but Singer says, well, that one loss was early in the season. We didn't have all our football players.
yeah, that's what happens at Helix, and that's why I say, Ramon, what would happen if football was pushed back to the winter time up against basketball, so to speak? And if you push basketball into baseball season, there's guys that play basketball and baseball, or ones that play girls basketball and softball. If they push basketball in the spring, I mean, there'll be some choices that have to be made. That's why I'm hoping, but again, as long as it's safe, always with that caution, that hopefully the seasons go on when they're supposed to. Otherwise, again, you're going to have students having to make choices about which sports to play that they've never had to make that choice before. Let's hope they get to a point where they have to make a choice period to play.
Yeah, and I don't know what the exact date transition from Coach Schneep to Joe Hines as the new commissioner. I imagine it's got to be very, very soon. But
July 6th, I believe, he takes over.
okay, so Schneep has actually come out and had a few more comments recently, and I think his position has been, and granted they could have to adapt, but I think here in the San Diego section, we want to keep it as close to normal as possible because we don't want anybody to miss out if they're a dual sport athlete and have been, training over the last couple of years as they've approached their time to participate in interscholastic athletics, that they would miss the time. And that's why we feel, from in our world, that's why we feel so terribly for all of these spring sport athletes that miss their final year because, so many students will not play organized sports on such a high level ever again in their lives. I mean, it's one thing to go out and play rec basketball or something after you graduate or play with, young, strong athletes where you're having good games, but it might not be organized. So that's the thing. That's why we do it. That's why we have, athletics. And it's too bad. And it kind of transitions to this whole situation. You talk about all these problems that Major League Baseball has, and I'm just terribly disappointed in the contraction of our baseball leagues in this country. The folding of many minor league teams. I mean, I think they said, I don't know what the last count was, but it was in the low 40s, the number of teams that were going to be, contracted or shut down.
Yeah.
And, I don't see independent leagues popping up. And that's scary. I mean, that's scary because minor league baseball is so important to the fabric of many communities in this country. I mean, if anyone's ever been up to Lake Elsinore, right? And, it's a totally different atmosphere. And some people, say they like it better than the major league atmosphere because of the simplicity of the game and the hard trying efforts of the players because, they're not sitting with the $1 million contracts in their back pocket. So they're giving it their all at any time. So that hurts.
Yeah, and Ramon, it's funny when you said that. One person that came to mind is Mark Sweeney, who works with us on Fox Sports San Diego, because Mark was a Major League Baseball player. He's played in the World Series. But when you talk to Mark, what's funny, he always talks about the Cape Cod League, how much fun that was. And, sadly, the Cape Cod League was one of the first to go. I mean, the numbers that I've heard, I believe there were like 162 minor league teams already. 40 have been contracted. We're down just above 120. I mean, Sports Illustrated this month, I've got it right over here, it had a great story on minor league baseball, what's happening, because not only the contraction, but also the people that own those teams, they're not worth $2.1 billion. The teams they have, they're worth maybe a few $1 million, which sounds like a lot, and it is. But with not having a season, those teams have basically become, for lack of better words, worthless. I mean, there's people, minor league baseball owners, who are having to take out loans not just for their minor league baseball team, but just to survive themselves. Yeah. And it really is a crime. It's really sad.
Yeah, those are just businesses. Those are businesses. That's what's being affected, throughout the country. In the pandemic, and I just feel for everyone, what's happened, because look, the tragedy involving George Floyd has affected us all, and we're all, deep felt emotions regarding the public's response, and we watched, in horror, what happened in the city of La Mesa, just to see our community. I mean, that La Mesa Springs Shopping Center, I going back, 40 years, 50-year-old shopping center that, I'm sure that many people have patronized. I mean, I spent many nights there after Helix football games, going over to Round Table, things like that. And remember that Bonds, it used to be a Gemco back in the 70s.
I remember that.
And so just to see that happen right in our neighborhood where we thought, look, the downtown big, the big demonstrations that they had there, and they had a little bit of damage and small bit of looting, but nothing like happened in that La Mesa Springs Shopping Center, and it hit so close to home for me and for so many in the East County. But and we know that the chain of events that kind of has set things off across this country. But I can't help but think that the frustration of the pandemic kind of capitulated into that situation and made the emotions stir even greater for all Americans.
Yeah, because you've been stuck indoors for 3 months, basically. I mean, just a couple of things, if I could. On George Floyd, I mean, I believe in Western justice. I think the guy who killed him should hang by a tree. That's just my feeling. Another feeling I have, though, is for police officers because they're really getting beaten up on now. And I think we all have to remember 9/11, the 71 New York law enforcement officers that gave their lives up going in to try to save others. I mean, remember Sandy Hook, the shooting, who was the first ones there? Remember Mandalay Bay, who protected the people? I mean, I was at the shootings at Santana High School, sadly, in 2001 when 2 students were killed, and at Granite Hills that same year when fortunately nobody was killed during a shooting. But you got to remember who were the first people there were the police officers. And the sad thing to me is that for the few bad ones, that all the police are taking a bad rap. It's kind of like I always put in my mind, for the very few teachers who are molesters, they're not all. Don't put them all under the umbrella.
Yeah.
That's my comment on that. Like I say, I think the one who did it should hang by a tree that did it to George Floyd. But on the other hand, let's not bash all the police. One thing I'm just going to say one thing about with the police, I think to get a real feel for the police, I would like to see this with the newspapers. 2 things. Number one, police logs are public record. I'd like to see a newspaper print one day just so people know, what the police are really doing. And number 2, because I've done it before, let's see a reporter go out on a Saturday night with the police. And I mean, some of the areas that are more dangerous, go out and see what's really happening, because what's being portrayed, it's kind of like any misstep a police officer makes now, they're held accountable, and they should be. But let's not judge all police officers by a few. That's my feeling.
And for all the takes of disbanding the police or defunding the police, it could happen, and it may happen in some cities. But I think that people hear that term and they get, scared or carried away. We've seen, there's talk, anybody can research Camden, New Jersey, and see when they talk about disbanding or defunding, you're talking about a reorganization or a reclassification of police forces. And it's not like they're just going to go away. In fact, in Camden, really, you've seen like maybe an increase in the amount of people. It's just a different way of policing. So nobody has to panic and worry if they think the police are going away. They're just maybe structural changes. The tough part is putting timetables in training and things like that moving forward. That kind of is the difficulty in transitioning to new styles of potential law enforcement. So, Steve, I just want to give a little perspective from my own part here on your show. It's you and me today, so I'm kind of your guest. Other than watching sports every moment of my waking hours, whether it be pro sports or college sports, or dedicating all my other time to following prep sports, writing about it, producing eastcountysports.com, and doing all the videos that we do. I have a job, full-time job as a poker dealer, and currently I'm at Hamul Casino. And about a month ago, the casino, somewhat controversially, reopened. It was the first one, kind of reopened. And, in our little poker room where we have 10 tables and a busy night pre-pandemic might have been, 4, 5, 6 poker games. Well, we were the only poker room in the entire West Coast to open, and still right now one of the few. Certainly none in Southern California. A few are scheduling maybe later this week to try to get rolling. But I've been overwhelmed at my job, thankfully, because it's kind of kept me busy. But I'm working 6 days a week, usually on an average of 10 hours or more a day, making pretty decent money because of the generosity of everyone getting back. But, where I work, and there's a lot of people are upset with casinos because they have reopened. And I'm not putting a broad brush on it at all, saying it's good or bad. I had to get back to work. My job called on me, so I went back to work. And I feel, as a 51-year-old man, safe. I feel safe, and everyone's wearing masks. But Steve, we're in a little 10-table poker room. I'm sitting with 9 other people within proximity of about 6 feet of one another. Everybody's wearing a face mask, but man, there's a lot of people in that casino. And I just relate it kind of to what happened with the general public recently in all these demonstrations. People conglomerated in very close proximity for the last several weeks, as I have at work. My temperature is checked every day before I go in. I get a little wristband. Anybody who has a temperature, and I haven't heard of any incidents at our casino, but it just makes me think that after all these public comminglings throughout the country, hundreds of thousands of people, there might be upticks in the pandemic, and the numbers are pretty solid. You can look at them on sites like worldometers.info or even on the UT website locally. There are places that are pretty official as far as the numbers are concerned. If we don't see massive spikes following the last 2 weeks of social unrest, then I think as a whole, our country and the world is getting healthier. You look at some of these other countries and how they're getting back to business, even in areas where the COVID pandemic struck quite ferociously. In Italy and Spain and the UK, in New York, places like that. So I think that the next phase of the experiment, I don't know what else to call it, is underway. And let's just see where we stand when the results come in. And they'll probably be relatively sooner rather than later, where we'll see numbers, because we've had 2 weeks of demonstrations all over this country, and the next 2 weeks of results in terms of COVID-19 cases is going to be very interesting.
Yeah, Ramon, I'm with you on that. As you know, we've hit high noon, so we're basically at the end of our show, but I appreciate you bringing that up. But if you could, right now with your schedule and my schedule hasn't started yet, with hopefully soon with Major League Baseball, but just so people know, we're still going to be doing a show every week, but the time may not be the same. Tell us, what's the best way for people to find out what time we're going to be on and who our guests are going to be?
Yeah, we send out a little note on Facebook, usually the night before, when I, just put it together and put out the time. Dolan's Dugout, it might roll by your timeline for all of our East County subscribers on Facebook. And of course, all of our archive shows are on YouTube and in the East County Sports, Facebook page. So we're here. We're going to be here. And I just want to mention real quick as we wrap up the show, Steve, and we talked about how football's coming. And I've got a pretty special show planned this season. I'll just kind of talk about it right now. So if any of our hardcore football fans ever made it to the end of this video, and I want to mention it to you if I haven't already, but I have a great idea, and I'm rolling with it because I want to do something special for this next football season because it's so highly anticipated. But what I plan on doing is going out to my a couple of games like I've done for 30 years, right? But as soon as I get back from that last game, we're going to go live right here on Facebook, on YouTube, doing these shows, just like we've been doing these shows with you, with Adam, with Dave, with the student athletes. We're going to go live on Friday night, Steve. Right before the PPR comes on, we're going to invite coaches, players, media. I'm going to sit here just like I kind of do by myself when I'm all lonely, crunching all these games, looking at all the results. Well, instead, I'm just going to read everything that I'm watching and hearing and seeing about prep football on Friday nights. Hopefully going to get kids right after the games coming on the show, talking about their big performances, coaches talking about the players and their great games, and also media, the games that they saw on Friday night. Hopefully just spending a couple of hours, not too late, but we know Friday nights kids are staying up late after the big game because of the excitement. And I hope to bring some excitement right here to East County Sports Network. Even working on making sure we can actually get the highlights onto the screen as well. I'm working hard trying to learn all this stuff. You've teased me every week about getting this show on the air. It's as easy as pushing a couple of buttons to a certain extent, but there's a little bit more to it as well, especially trying to get some things. Remember, we had Anthony Lawrence, we were able to show those highlights.
Yeah.
And I think as long as we can get our field reporters to get their highlights in the right type of format and things, I might be hosting a show and rendering videos and things like that. But I think there'll be enough activity on screen with other athletes and maybe a co-host helping. And I think I'm going to make you come on here and tell me about the game you went to as well and things like that. I think it's going to be a really cool show, a really cool concept that I'm working on. So if anybody has any ideas, they can shoot me a DM on Twitter or things like that. Or, hey, I just want to send it out there right now to all the coaches throughout the Grossmont district that, hey, I want you to come on that show if you can, if you have time. We're going to do a live show talking about all the games on Friday night. I think it's going to be awesome.
Well, we'll do it. Whenever we do a game, we'll do a weekly game on 97.3 The Fan, so we'll certainly check in with you every Friday. Hopefully you can get Braden Suprenant and Coach Quintero on with you too, because this is going to be great, because what you're talking about, again, will be as soon as the games are over. The games are over, 9:30-ish. PPR doesn't come on until 11 o'clock. So, hey, you got an hour and a half for the PPR. Come join us here on EastCountySports.com. And Ramon, again, thanks so much for being my guest today on Dolan's Dugout, although you are the one who puts this show together. Thank you so much. And again, just like you say, for our viewers, just keep watching. We'll have a show next week. Time to be determined, place right here. Thanks so much, Ramon. I really appreciate your help today.
Hey, where would I be without you, Steve? You've been my link. We've tried to cover sports as best we can over these 2+ months. We're going to keep doing it until we're back to normal.
That's right. Thanks so much. Everybody have a good day.
For Steve Dolan, I'm Ramon Scott. Thank you for joining us.